Welcome to Tech in 10 for this Thursday, the 8th of August. Today we're going to be going into part two of the practical cybersecurity basics. So if you haven't joined us last week, we do have a recording of that online, so please check out our website. And otherwise, we'll just kick into part number two. If you've got any questions along the way, please use the Q&A button at the top and we'll touch on those at the end. So let's get into it. So part two, cybersecurity is still super important. It's quite topical, of course. And in the first part, we touched on some security tips, breaking down essentials. And we're going to take that into part two here, which is educating and controlling access. So in the first part, we went through and spoke about strengthening defenses and staying updated and backed up. So what we'll come through and talk about in this one is some strategies around safeguarding your business or your personal systems from cyber threats. This will include things like securing your Wi-Fi and your network, educating your team, and implementing best practices around effective access control. The last part is often overlooked, which is developing a comprehensive incident response plan for when something happens. We always keep saying that it's a case of when, not if. So it's important to have a plan in place that clearly communicates the things that you need to go through. So we'll touch on all of those. First one we'll touch on is a really simple one, is securing your Wi-Fi network. Definitely change the default name and password and use strong encryption to make sure that your network is secure. So WPA3 is the current standard for that. It might not mean a lot to you, but when you go into check on these sorts of things, always try to use the highest level and try to use a strong password that you can use to protect so that people can't guess it, because your network can be a factor in your security. So you want to keep out those unauthorized to access things. The next one is educating your employees. So often cybersecurity incidents start with things like phishing, and your people are the front line to that, and they're also they're the biggest risk, but they're the biggest advantage that you have. So keeping them up to date on how to recognize phishing emails, avoid suspicious downloads, and building some safety around reporting potential security incidents to the IT team is really important. So it's people getting duped by dodgy emails is not something that should, cause any issues for them, that you want to prevent them from doing that in the future. So that's super important. Implementing access controls, so limiting access to data that you don't need. So whether that's sensitive, whether it's systems, the principle of least privilege should be applied wherever possible. When you do that, it limits down what you can accidentally do. A lot of data loss is attributed to insider accidents. So people doing things by accident and sending things or making available or deleting. So definitely consider least privilege access based on roles and responsibilities. So then it's quite structured and easy to bring people in and out. And the last one we've got here is using a firewall. So the firewall is the thing that protects you from all the bad stuff on the internet that can come in. You'll generally have a firewall, but there are different levels that you can do and put in place. So making sure that you have that enabled, not just on your home network, on your work network, but also on your devices. They do come with these things to help protect you. So as many layers as possible is super important as well. Now we talk about educating and controlling access. So next thing you want to do is make sure you have a cybersecurity policy. So a written policy helps establish security practices and guidelines. So it should cover things like your passwords and the expectations around that, data protection, acceptable use, and as we said before, an incident response policy. Setting these things is really important because although in a technical sense you can set things like password requirements, password 123 exclamation mark does meet those requirements, but it's one of the most insecure passwords you could send. So it's important to educate and build those policies around those to help steer it in the right direction. Technical controls don't always tick all those boxes. So monitor your systems. So if you don't do this yourself, obviously you have an IT team that can sort this out. So you should be monitoring different things like network traffic, user activity, security logs, because early detection can prevent issues from becoming bigger than what they are. So there's a lot of larger hacks that have come about. One of the recent ones that made big news was the one at Sony, where they apparently had access for over 6 months. There was one recently with a medical records company in Australia here that they managed to download 6 terabytes of data. So a massive amount of data because they had access for so long. So monitoring is really important, and it can prevent such major problems from occurring. And having a plan for instant response. So having that created for the potential or scenario-based cyber incidents. So making a list of all the potential ones that might occur and what the steps are to mitigate that security breach. So the really key things here is communication, who's responsible for what sort of aspects to it, and what the process is to make sure that you're mitigating the damage that may happen during an incident. So worthwhile to have that in place so that when you're in the thick of it, you've got something you can reference to use, that you don't have to think too much. You can just work through that plan. And that's where we come to the end. So that's some of the tips that we had in this 2-part series. Now I'm going to throw over to some Q&A to see if anybody had any questions, and start off with this one. So how can I secure my small business's Wi-Fi network effectively? There's a couple of things you can do. Obviously, not having the defaults of whatever comes with is a good idea. So change the name that is displayed. Change the password to something unique and complex. If you need a password generator, quamba.com.au/pass will generate some passwords that are easy enough to remember and to type in. Make sure you're using the latest supported encryption, so try to go higher than lower when you're configuring a device. It's pretty straightforward to do that. They generally come with this enabled out of the default, so you don't have to change too much. And just making sure that you're updating everything as often as they become available. So it's not easy to keep things up to date all the time, but it's important to check. These companies don't write the updates for the fun of it. There are reasons for it, and most of them will be around security vulnerabilities and bugs. So definitely worthwhile doing that. The other thing that is a lot more common now is setting up a guest network for visitors, and these networks generally for sort of business grade networks, you would want to have isolation. So there's a way that you can have each person that connects is only allowed to access the internet. That's pretty much it. So that would be good to have for your guests so that they don't have access to your network, because you never know what's going to be brought onto the network in that case. Next question, why is it important to educate my employees, and how can I do it effectively? Well, how can you do it? Let's start with why it's important. So obviously a lot of attacks start with social engineering based types of attacks. So making sure that people are able to identify those puts you at the front line of defense against those threats. So being able to identify what's happening there is really important. The people are the biggest risk because of the social engineering. These people are quite good at doing the social engineering. So they're also the greatest strength to identify things that are out of the ordinary. So that's why it's important. How to do it. Real life scenario training can be a good one, building engagement. We often do a security 101 presentation to a group or a team, which will bring sort of forth other questions, which is really, really handy. The other one is having ongoing security awareness training and also simulating phishing and seeing how people go in practical terms. So there's some things that we do quite often. And what do we got here? So what steps should I take to develop an incident response plan for a business? So there are quite a few things online that you can use as a boilerplate or a template. It should include how to identify threats and vulnerabilities. It should include procedures for detecting, reporting, containing security incidents, and also guidelines around communication. So both internally, externally. It's a good idea to test it and to run a simulation of your plan and document everything that happens. Anything that you learn throughout those processes, it's worth continuously improving the document and the plan to improve that. So we do have a template that we can provide as well. So please reach out if you have any questions on that. And I think that's all the questions we have for today. So thank you for joining us for part 2 of this webinar around practical cybersecurity basics. Hope you got something out of it. Until next time, have a good one.